Bang.
Oh, God.
I have to hit both of them, Pete.
I'm not sure he deserves to have that little clicker.
I've got the bigger one down in Puerto Rico, Pete.
Oh, God.
This is just my little portable one for when we're on the road. By the way, I'll be doing the Rebel Edge, Pete, from Cancun, Mexico on Thursday.
Oh, God. I hope do they have internet in Mexico?
It'll get there. It'll get there. Folks, you're tuned in to the Rebel Edge. I'm John Najarian. He's Pete Najarian. Jared is our producer extraordinaire. And we're about ready to kick it off right now with the 1 minute macro, Pete. Take it away.
All right. Last week, the 10-year hit 4%. This week, we're right around 3.6%. So it's come in a little bit. And suddenly, we've got a big rally going on in the market. That's the macro minute. Next.
Well, I'll give you just this much longer than that.
All
Pete.
right.
We're going to be talking about Tesla, of course, because of the big drop off. But I just thought that people need to have this put in perspective.
Mm-hmm.
So far this year, Ford has delivered 23,000 vehicles.
Holy
Now,
smoke.
we'll talk EVs, Pete, electric vehicles, EVs, full EVs, plug-ins, and so forth. GM, I think, had a total between Chevrolet and GMC of 7,200.
Pretty impressive.
So Tesla happened to do a heck of a lot more than that, but we'll get to that in about 6 seconds because that is one of our lead stories today. Is Tesla is being hammered today, folks, down better than 8%. And why? Well, because they only delivered not 7,000, not 23,000, only 343,000 vehicles in the quarter, not the year, in the quarter, Pete. So, I mean, I view this as a screaming buy, Pete, because China was shut down. And even though everybody has to compete for, some of the supply chain issues, whether it's chips, whether it's lithium for the batteries and so forth, Tesla's still the big dog, don't you think?
Yeah, absolutely they are, John. And I think to your point, that is why it's getting sold off. But I don't know that you want to jump in front of the steamroller just yet, because on the take today, I did talk about the fact that Tesla had huge put buying, 18,000 of this week's expiring 250 strike puts, John. So I wouldn't jump in too fast on this one. I think you're 100% correct. I think it's a huge overreaction to what the numbers really are. And I think, obviously China's starting to open up. They were closed. Now they're starting to open up. So there's a lot of different reasons why I think this is a name that absolutely can rip to the upside. Today, it's now at about 242. John, when they were buying those puts today, stock was right around 247 to 250. So it's basically a right at the money put saying, you know what, this momentum's going to hit. It's going to be short lived, but let's kind of ride it. And I think that's what we're seeing with those puts that are being bought today.
Don't disagree at all, Pete. Yeah. Let's segue over to, or as Tom Keene would say over on Bloomberg, Pete, Segui.
I love Tom Keene. One of my all-time favorites, man. That guy's the best.
He is. I got to get a bow tie one of these days. Anyway, hi, Tom Keene. Thanks for all the tweets. Crude oil, Pete, climbing above 84 today. Now, it's pulled back a little bit, but what you need to know, folks, is that they've got a meeting Wednesday in which they will decide how much they're going to cut back. They are going to cut back on production to hold price. And it's one of the ways to do it, of course, because we all know supply and demand. If you have too much supply, then the demand, prices are going down. So they're going to cut supply until China fully reopens, Pete.
Yeah, it's interesting, John. You're talking about OPEC and what they're doing. They're talking about 1 million barrels a day potentially to cut back. I mean, these are real numbers we're talking about here. But it is interesting to see how that's reacting right now with oil. We were at 79 on Friday. Here we are at 84 today. Now we've pulled back off of that 84 level. I'll tell you what, John, the energy play is still intact. It's out there for sure. It's going to be an amazing thing. it's been a wild ride, an absolute wild ride. We all know that. You look at some of these names from the beginning of the year, one of which I'm going to be talking about for unusual option activity. But I'll tell you what, some of these stocks, how much they have moved already this year, and maybe have a little bit more based upon what OPEC does. These moves have been absolutely spectacular this year, John, in the energy space.
Yep, they sure have, Pete. And I still say, as you and I have repeatedly here, that on this significant dip, I am a buyer. It sounds like we're two thumbs up
Two
on
thumbs up.
energy
Totally.
here at this point. All right, Pete, Viasat. Now, I think it's pretty obvious what they do, communications via satellite. And one of the groups that they provide this for, Pete, is basically special operators, SEALs, Army Rangers, in other words, defense contractors, and the people that support all those special operators that we just talked about. They're going to be spinning off for about $2 billion. This unit, it's called Link 16, I think, Pete, and they're going to be spinning it off to L3Harris Technologies. And that stock is also up, but boy, Viasat, VSAT, up better than 30% today.
You know, we've had some monstrous moves, John. We go back to Biogen last week where it had that huge move to the upside, the great news about what they're doing with some of their drugs specifically. You know, it's scary how fast these things can move. They get hit to the downside when they miss, or they skip and they don't actually get approval. But now, some of the results that they've got, it's a different story. In this particular name, John, this really is helpful for this company in terms of the free cash flow that they have been burning. And now all of a sudden they can actually buy down some of the debt. I think this is a great move, and it's a monstrous move when you're talking about this stock, not just in the stock itself, but the size of what they're actually selling off. About $2 billion is what they're getting. The market cap of the company is not too much terribly higher than that. So it is amazing, and it shows you right now the hunger out there for markets. Obviously, we're in a really strong move today, first day of October, but people have been waiting around trying to find the exact time to get into some of these names for sure. And they're getting results very, very rapidly as well, John.
Yep. Now, Pete, I want to switch gears a little bit to what you talked about top of the show in your macro minute, which is bonds, because that's interest rates, folks. And the differential between the 2-year and the 10-year, that's, you know, obviously when that inverts like it has and like it is, it signals recession. Well, the 10-year, like Pete said, hit 4% last week. It's pulled back to under 3.7 and pushing down towards 3.6%. That's a good thing. But apparently, there's a lot of companies still struggling with these much higher interest rates, Pete. And we're about to get another 75 basis point move on the next Fed meeting, by the way.
Right. It's a combination of what's going on here, John, and you just got to go over and look at what's going on with the UK as well. There's a lot going on in that specific area, you know, talking about rates, talking about taxes, cutting taxes, all these other things, all of that put together. It's why I think we're seeing the kind of move we are today. Now, is it going to be sustainable? That's the one thing we just always wonder about, John, when we see these kind of moves and what's going on. If the 10-year continues this path lower, I would say absolutely. I think we have a little bit more room to the upside, and actually maybe a lot of room to the upside if the 10-year continues to break down. This has been rapid. For people who don't really understand it, I don't think when they hear, well, just last week it was around 4%, it's 3.6, they kind of nonchalantly say, well, big deal. It actually is a big deal, and it's really a rapid move. So it's something I think that is very important for people to keep their eyes on, no doubt about that, because that is a lot of what's been behind a lot of the buying and specifically the selling the entire month of September.
Well, Pete, I'm going to switch gears over into unusual activity. I know it's one of the most popular segments, and for good reason, because we've got algorithms that are out there looking for unusual purchases of calls, which would mean that we're looking for upside. So if you're a stock trader, not an option trader, well, I guess you participate by buying the stock. And conversely, if we see downside activity, meaning we see puts being bought in big numbers, that means people expect that stock to decline. And Pete, Norwegian Cruise Lines, we talked about it a little over a week ago, I think, you and I. And it had strong, unusual put activity when it was at $14. Now it broke through 12 and is barely holding 11.54 right now after a little bit of a bounce. I think it goes lower, Pete. I just did a quick look and said that $13 billion worth of debt. That's $13.2 billion worth of debt on their balance sheets. Now, if you net the cash and the debt, it's more like 11.5 billion, but still, for a $4.8 billion company, this is a loss. And today, there's even another big buyer of puts, and they're buying puts in the short term, Pete. October 14th, which is next Friday, they're buying those puts at the 11 strike, implying that they think, some hammer is going to come down on these guys in the short term.
It's pretty daggone scary, John, because that's not the only name in the cruise ship area that's seeing monster put buying. Monster put buying. I can't say it enough. And you've been right on this one. I mean, unbelievable, this move in Norwegian to the downside. And we've had those puts. People all the time. I hear these guys, John, there's a lot of clowns out there that'll go, you know what, those unusual options, that really doesn't signify anything. Oh, really? First of all, why do we have the option? Second of all, why are they buying puts out the wazoo and suddenly we get that move to the downside? Tesla today is a great example. Norwegian is a great example. There's a lot of different other ones out there that I could talk about, both upside and downside, some of that buying. John, I'm going to look right now at Occidental, going right back to energy, because they are going right in the very short term. When I say they, the sizable traders that are out there. But on top of that, let's not forget, it is a Warren Buffett name. We know how much he's been buying. He's got what, John? I think about a 21% stake right now in Occidental or whatever it is. It's something very large. I know that. And he just continues to seem to be, Berkshire continues to want to be in this specific name. And they've come after it time and time again. Back in August, this is a $70 stock. We actually got into the mid 60s. That's about where we're trading right now. So it's pulled back a little bit. But we've got a buyer of 5,000 of Friday's expiring. So maybe they're looking at that meeting, John, the OPEC meeting, because the October 7th expiring 65 calls, $1.15 up to about $1.50 is what they're going for, with the stock call at around 64. Pretty interesting to see that call buying. I love what we're seeing here. And I think, I've loved the energy space for a while. I love these beta names that are out there that have a 2, a 3, a 4, and higher betas that are going to really move if we start to see those kind of moves in crude. I think this is one of those names. Pretty interesting. I like what we're seeing going on right now with Occidental.
Yeah. And like you said, Pete, when Warren Buffett gets the green light to buy up to what is it, 50 some odd percent of the company, we all know that that's just this far away from being acquired by Berkshire. If that's indeed the case, you're going to take all the shorts out of the market in that one in a big way. All right, Pete. So you're back with the Sports Huddle yesterday on Sunday, talking about some of the big NFL games that were coming our way, but you always recap it with a little bit of college football first.
Yeah.
So tell us who you think the teams to watch are in college football right now.
Well, the most interesting thing for me right now, John, is this. The parity that's in college football is absolutely astounding. And, that's the fun part of this, because for a while now, it's just Alabama, it's just Georgia. Yes, they're still in the number 1, number 2 slots, although they've been flipping back and forth a little bit because both of them have had some really rough games. Georgia could barely get past Missouri this weekend. Alabama had to get into the fourth quarter to put up 21 more points to make it actually a game for themselves. They leapfrogged, got back up into that number 1 spot. We highlighted that Ole Miss game, John, against Kentucky. We're talking about Kentucky, of what was a basketball school. They're ranked number 7. Well, they did go down for all the right reasons, because you and I were talking about this last Thursday. Great game, great lineup, but you know what? It still matters if you can run the football, and that's what Ole Miss does, and that's what they did. They overpowered them very nicely. They went kind of toe-to-toe in the passing game, but when it comes to running the football, Ole Miss just ran it up and down the field on these guys, so it made it pretty interesting. But I got a sleeper out there for you, John, and it happens to be in your state right now, Illinois. The University of Illinois. A lot of people don't realize these guys are 4-1. Now, they had a bunch of turnovers against Indiana, which is why they lost that game. Indiana's not the old Indiana either. Pretty good football team. but Illinois is really starting to put it together. As a matter of fact, they put it together so well that they went up to Wisconsin. Bielema, who used to be the head coach at Wisconsin, he stepped away, went to Arkansas. He'd been bouncing around. He's back now with Illinois. And all they did is go in there and wax the Badgers to the point where they fired the head coach.
Yeah.
So there's a lot going on there, John. And I think it's fun. And I think these guys, the Illinois, the Fighting Illini, they might actually have one of their better teams in a really long time. Am I reading too much into it early, or are they for real?
I think they're for real. So I was looking at some of the betting lines too, Pete, and obviously people that are astute that really follow the game like you are really putting a lot of money where their mouth is, as far as Illinois being better this year than a lot of people would have given them credit for. They also, Pete, fired the coach and the offensive and defensive coordinators out at my daughter's school, Colorado.
Yeah.
So they basically reloaded for the Buffs after just a horrible couple games. And I thought it was really weird. The coach, maybe it was a week ago, Pete, he was apologizing for how poorly they played, but saying they needed support from the fans. And I'm thinking, what? I mean, they're called fans for a reason, folks. It means fanatic.
Mm-hmm.
So if you think that fans are going to be very forgiving about you having a crappy season, you're knocking on the wrong door. So, he's gone. Offensive coordinator gone. Defensive coordinator gone. And, that's just kind of the way things play out. Let's talk NFL, Pete, because we got a good one tonight. Obviously, this rivalry goes back a long ways, and San Francisco against the Rams. Who you taking?
Well, I think first, John, we got to hit the AFC just real quick.
Oh, okay.
The game of the week, the absolute game of the week is, all right, how good is Buffalo? How good is Baltimore? We already know you've got Josh Allen, who's absolutely outstanding, but he's had a little bit of a stumble, but he's been outstanding. And then, of course, Lamar Jackson, who might be one of the smartest football players around because, A, he represents himself, and as long as he can stay healthy, it's going to work better and better and better for him, John. But here's the interesting thing. Those guys went toe-to-toe. Do you know that both of them had about the same number of carries, I think 10, 11 carries each? They both ran for about 70 yards, led their teams in rushing. And, oh, by the way, these are quarterbacks. So they absolutely were throwing the ball around. And Buffalo went into Baltimore and walked away with a win. It tells you a lot about just how good those guys really might be. And you know what? There's been a lot of health issues out there. And jumping to this game that you're talking about, when I'm looking and I look at Stafford, and these guys are the Super Bowl champs, I like Stafford. He's got more interceptions than touchdowns right now. That's a bit of a problem. He doesn't have a center and he doesn't have a guard. They're out for the week. There's a lot of headaches that offense has got. And, oh, by the way, they're playing against the 49ers, who, by the way, are the number one defense in the NFL right now. So the problem they have, Jimmy G.
Yeah.
He going to step out of the end zone? Is he going to throw some errant, idiotic pass to somebody that he shouldn't? I mean, he does it time and time again, John. I don't know if it's the pressure or what, but he seems to really struggle when he is under pressure. I mean, last week is just absolutely the perfect example of Jimmy G. He steps out of bounds, could have thrown an interception. I mean, everything was going on that was going on wrong. What do you think about the game, though? Can he maybe step up? And does the 49ers at home have a shot in this game?
They definitely have a shot. We both know that.
Yeah.
With that defense, you saw them in person when they were scrimmaging with the Vikings, Pete, this summer. So, yeah, that defense can shut you down, especially if you're playing without a couple starters. Yeah. Now, I want to drop back for a second, though, because you said pressure. I think Harbaugh over at the Ravens is under some extreme pressure. And a lot of it comes from exactly what you said, Lamar Jackson. I mean, they need to sign this guy. He said he will not negotiate during the season. Right. And he's been true to that so far. He threw a pick, as he was trying to get, he tried to force one into the end zone, Pete. Yeah. That was not a good decision. But, I mean, 17 points. This is the second time this year they've lost after having a 17-point lead. Yeah. You don't see a Baltimore defense do that because they're known, Ray Lewis and all the rest. They're known for basically smash mouth football, and you don't see people come back 17 points. So I give a lot of credit to the Buffalo Bills on the road doing that. And I know my buddy Jordan Freed, our friend Pete, who was down at RebelCon, and the owner of NFT.com, he had to be smiling ear to ear during that one. But down 17 points and you make that comeback, that tells you a lot about the defense and a lot of things they're not doing right in Baltimore.
Yeah, that's their identity normally, John. You're 100% right. And when you get on the offensive side, you just got to let Lamar be Lamar. I think the one issue is they're kind of almost corralling him a little bit, John. It's not like Mahomes. If anybody watched last night, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Mahomes will throw the ball in any way he wants to. He'll do it underhand. He'll do the sidearm. He'll do he did the jump shot last night for the touchdown. Yep. I mean, and the funny thing is, John, they actually showed them preparing for the game, and obviously they were having fun. They were playing basketball with the football, and actually Mahomes did do a jump shot almost identical to what he did during the game in warmups. And I'm sure they had no idea that was going to happen, but you've got to let those guys who are that good kind of give them absolutely no reins. You just say, you know what, do what you do best. And I think they're kind of holding him back. And because of that, John, it gives that opposing team the ability to make these comebacks. And yes, the defense was bad, but the offense didn't put up points after they needed to time and time again. And that was part of the problem as well.
Pete, I only wish Lamar Jackson had Andy Reid as his coach, because as you know, he does that red zone offense. And, that's one of the most inspiring and potentially dangerous offenses when they're on the field inside the red zone. A lot of people need to back up and get more room. They don't need it. Just like you said, they've got so many weirdo gimmick plays that they do from in there, whether it's somebody else taking a direct snap, like the tight end taking a direct snap with Mahomes standing back there or whatever. I mean, they will do those plays, and Kels and all these other guys. I mean, man, I like I say, I wish Lamar Jackson had that kind of creative coach on offense with the Ravens, but he doesn't. And you got to play with
when you've got a coach who's basically holding the Waffle House menu and he's pulling stuff out. It's absolutely phenomenal. I mean, it's people have joked about it for years, but it is so funny. He's got all these highlights. The thing is yellow. I mean, it looks like the menu, and it really does. But he pulls out stuff that I wish was on the menu because it's so fun. They are one of the most fun teams to watch play because of how he lets them just play football however they want, as long as it makes a little bit of sense. It's great.
Yep. Well, I'll tell you what else is great. We're back tomorrow. We'll be back tomorrow, folks, with another Rebels Edge at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. Tell your friends. We hope they join us. We hope you join us. And Pete also has the take. Remember, every day, 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time. And I have 3 at 3. So I'll be back in a couple hours this afternoon. See you tomorrow, folks.